Making sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Twig. I'm the supervisor for elementary science for DCPS. Today, I'm going to go over some things that you may expect for your fifth grade student to see towards the end of the year with regards to testing, as well as how you can help with getting them ready for testing and what resources are really helpful. And then also kind of give you a little bit of experience of what your students are going to see on that test. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch on over. Okay, hopefully everyone can hear and see my screen. I have one screen up today, so if you have any questions, I know we will get to those towards the end, but we're going to go ahead and start. Again, I'm Madeline Twig. This is the Spark Science Success in fifth grade. Again, our focus will be on the fifth grade Florida Science Assessment towards the end of the year. But just some things that your student might see and just information that you might want to know. So science is a little bit different than ELA and math. Science is actually only tested in grade 5, 8, and biology, and then depending upon their courses when they're in high school. But we do have a grade 5 test for those fifth grade students, specifically on science. Now that means that the test is not only on what those students have learned in fifth grade, but actually in K through 5. So it's so important that our students are always experiencing science in their classrooms and doing the work so that when we get to fifth grade, they're ready for that test. The testing window that the state has provided is May 9th to May 20th. Now, usually DCPS will pick 2 days for different schools to test on those specific days, but it can be different per school. So don't be alarmed, but it must be in the window of May 9th to May 20th for every school. And again, it may be on different times for different schools. The school will inform you when your students will be testing. Again, they have ELA and they also have math to test on. So it will be in some time frame in this window. And it is a 2-day test. It is also paper-based. So if your students are taking their progress monitoring tests throughout the year, there's 3 for fifth grade. It's called Progress Monitoring Assessment Number 1 or PMA 1, PMA 2, and PMA 3. Those are given throughout the year to make sure that we are recording our students' progress and making sure that they've mastered the standards. Now, this test is paper-based, just like those progress monitoring tests, but this will actually be cumulative. So it'll be 2 sessions, 80 minutes each, and it will actually be around 60 to 66 items on the test. It differs every year, and you can expect it will cover K through 5 standards your students will need to know. So when people say it's a fifth grade test, it really is a K through 5 test, about 6 years shoved into one test. So be aware of that. Now, the test is broken into different complexity levels because we want to, of course, get a range of complexity for our students for them to be able to practice and get used to. So you'll usually see a range of low questions between 10% and 20%. Again, it will differ. The moderate questions your students will see are 60% to 80%. And then those high level questions are around 10% to 20%. And I'm going to show you today some examples of the high questions you may see, and you can kind of see where students may struggle, and that's why it's so important that we practice with our students at all times. So there are 4 reporting categories on this test, and in the curriculum that we teach, there's Nature of Science is our first one. Nature of Science actually covers the practice of science. So if you're familiar with the scientific method or investigations, things like question, hypothesis, procedures, data collection. So really that focuses on the investigation, the skills that they need to be able to perform and explain evidence they've collected during an investigation. So that's pretty much the practice of science. And then characteristics of a scientific knowledge. And really it's just going over different skills and strategies that they'll need to learn to be scientists really in the line investigation. So I want to go over a sample question And I really wanted to make sure I put a chart in here for you all, because one of the biggest issues we see, or things that we hear from teachers, are that our students are not seeing enough charts. And when they get to the test, they're seeing a lot of graphs and a lot of charts. And so we always make sure to embed charts and graphs into the curriculum your students are working on, the practice assessments your students are working on, the progress monitoring assessments that your students take throughout the year, so that they can practice seeing these and not feel that charts are difficult or scary to them. And so if there's any time that you see a chart, or you're watching the news and there's some type of weather chart out there, it's always great to get your students involved in looking at those charts and understanding those charts. So I do want to just go over this question. Here is an example, and I know everyone can read it, and I'm only doing it in this view because it's easier for me to manipulate. So I'm going to read this question to you, but I really want us to, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to read the answer choices on your own, and I'll read them as well. And I really want you to think about what strategy the student needs to answer this. So the students in Miss Smith's class were using catapults to launch small and large marshmallows across the room. The table below shows the distances in centimeters that the marshmallows traveled. Which of the following statements best describes the student's data? So as you can see, we have different trials the students are doing here, and then the different sized marshmallows, small and large, and then the mean, which the students will know that means the average. But when you look at the actual question, what it's asking is, using this data chart, what can you conclude? So we look at A, small marshmallows travel an average of 9 centimeters. Is that true? By just looking at any of these, would this be a feasible answer? No. B, large marshmallows travel an average of more than 20 centimeters. Is that true? By looking at this data right here, is that a feasible answer? No. C, on average, small marshmallows travel farther than large marshmallows. Well, what evidence do we have of that? We know that the average small marshmallow travels 25 centimeters and the average large marshmallow travels 9 centimeters. So could this be a correct answer? Absolutely. Let's go to D and just double check, because we never want to miss a question. These are strategies we always want to go through with our students so they can talk it out, and they can go ahead and annotate. And also in ELA, they're learning these strategies. D, on average, large marshmallows go higher in the air than small marshmallows. Well, we just looked at the average and we saw that the small marshmallows are actually going further than the large marshmallows. So it would be C. So I just wanted to give a little example of nature of science. You will see more data. It will be more lengthy in wording usually because it's explaining some type of investigation. Let's go to the next reporting category. And as a reminder, there are 4. The next reporting category is physical science. Physical science is tough, but physical science is usually very fun for the students because this is where we really get to be hands-on. The physical science big ideas that they focus on are properties of matter, solid, liquids, gases, measuring and comparing those things, changes in matter. So I'm sure everyone remembers a volcano, making the volcanoes erupt, the baking soda, the vinegar. So that does go to chemical changes. Forms of energy, so different energy that your students experience on an everyday, and then forces and changes in motion. So that's those pushes and those pulls. So I wanted to give a little taste of another question that your students may see. Also, as we go through these questions, please be noticing that the nature of science, observation, skills to conclude, using models and having to make observations to answer your questions, those are all embedded throughout the rest of the reporting categories we're going to go over. So nature of science is very tricky. We always try to make sure it's embedded. So you'll see that in this physical science assessment question. I'm going to go ahead and read it again. Micah placed a beaker of water on a hot plate. When bubbles started forming in the water, he made the first sketch. After 5 minutes, he made the second sketch. What happened during the 5 minutes that Micah was observing the beaker of water? So as you can see, this is really asking us about changes in matter. So is this a physical or a chemical change? Well, if the students were to look at this picture, they can see a difference after 5 minutes in the water, and you can see a decrease in the amount of water. But you do see an increase of the steam, or we call it the water vapor, above the glass. So let's see what that observation I just made could actually connect with one of the answer choices. So A, water was changed into energy during a chemical change. Well, we know this isn't a chemical change because it hasn't changed into a new substance. It's still water. Water from liquid water to water vapor. So it is still the same material. So it cannot be A. And it's not changing into energy. B, water is changed into a different state during a physical change. Well, that absolutely could be the answer because we know the water is going from liquid to gas. C, water was changed into a different material during a physical change. Well, we know that can't be right without even looking at the picture because we know physical changes do not turn into new materials or substances. D, water was changed into a different material during a chemical change. Well, as we do know that a chemical change does change into a different material, that is not what we're seeing. So the only fair answer and feasible answer would have to be B. Water was changed into a different state during a physical change. We're going to move on to this third reporting category, which is Earth and Space Science. So Earth and Space Science does cover a lot. It does cover Earth in space and time. So of course you're going to talk about solar systems, our galaxy, the Milky Way. We're going to talk about rotation, revolution. We're also going to talk about the phases of the moon and the quote unquote movement of the stars, which we all know the stars aren't moving, we are, but that's kind of how we explain it to the students, that we are moving, which makes the stars move. Earth structures, which is a little bit more about Earth right now and not specifically in space. We talk about minerals, rock cycles. We also hit on natural resources, specifically Florida natural resources, and as well as weathering erosion. So how Earth's landforms are changing over time and the effects of that. And then lastly, for this big idea, we have Earth systems and patterns. And that's actually going to touch on weather. Weather is a very hard concept for our students to grasp. So a really helpful tool would to be have your students or your children at home look at the newspaper or look online at the weather and try to get used to seeing the different terminology and vocabulary, such as barometric pressure, atmosphere. Things like that, we want them to be seen nonstop so that they get very comfortable if it's asked on a test. But let's go over Earth and Space Science Assessment question sample, and we're really going to focus on Earth and Space and Time. Now, this standard actually goes to SC 4E54. It's a 4th grade standard, but it is tested in 5th grade. So that goes back to what we touched on in the beginning, that this is a K through 5 test. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. It is very small, but you can at least see the visual and the picture, which is really important, and that's really how it's going to help you answer this question. Again, nature of science is in here. You're using your observation skills. You're using your 5 senses to draw a conclusion based on the observation you're making on this visual picture. The diagram shows Earth's path around the sun. And so you can see there is the Earth in different positions in its revolution orbit. The sun is in the middle. They are labeled A, B, C, and D. How much time is required for Earth to travel between point A and point D? So the students should be able to tell me that it takes 3 months for the Earth to travel from point A to B. It takes another 3 months from B to C, and one more 3 months until D. Another way they could look at it is it takes 12 months for the Earth to come from point A all the way back to point A. So there's two different ways they can use their prior knowledge to understand this and answer it. But if we know that it takes 3 months to get from A to B, B to C, and then C to D, that has to be 9 months, because it would take 3 more months to complete 1 year or 12 months. We also know that the students, kind of a hint for the students is if they're a little bit confused if this is rotation or revolution, the illustration is actually labeled as illustration of Earth revolving around the sun. So that's a little hint. Always make sure your students are and your children are reading the hints and reading every aspect of the question. It really can help them. All right, we're going to go ahead and move over to the last reporting category, and I think the most fun at sometimes. Physical science is great because it's very hands-on in labs, but life science is all around them, and it's something they can experience by just stepping outside of their school or their door. There's different things that we experience in Florida as opposed to, Maine. So there's so many different experiences with life science and the different standards we're going to cover. So life science big ideas are organization and development of living things. So that's going to go into plant structures, that's going to go into human structures, animal structures. We're also going to talk about heredity and reproduction. We're going to talk about plant reproduction. We are going to talk about metamorphosis versus incomplete metamorphosis, and also animal reproduction. We will not get into human reproduction. The students do not need to know the reproduction organs either. So that will not be taught, but they will be taught kind of the quote unquote main organs. So that is also in there. And then lastly, it's interdependence. Interdependence is really just talking about the survival of the animals and really us as well, any organism, living organism. So that's talking about food chains, food webs, that's speaking on adaptations. So just be knowledgeable that there are lots of things that you can do with your students to kind of buff up, on life science. And that could be visiting the zoo. They have lots of great educational things for the students. And we actually partner with the zoo a lot to teach the students and as well as the teachers content on life science. So the zoo is great. Tree Hill is another option. So, and if you do need a list of these different places you can take your children on the weekends or after school, let us know. We do have a list of those. So let's go over this question. This is really going to focus on, it's a 3rd grade standard, but again, going back, it is a K through 5 test. So this is a 3rd grade standard. It's actually SC 3L 14.1, which is identifying the functions and the functions of a plant and their parts. So body systems in humans sometimes have similar functions to plant systems. For example, the human skeletal system provides structure and support for the body. The following picture shows the basic structure of a plant. Which labeled plant structure is most similar in function to the human skeletal system? So what the student really needs to look at is, what does the skeletal system do for our humans? Well, it supports us, right? So what part of the plant is supporting it? What part of the plant is keeping that flower above so gravity does not pull it down? The answer would be C, the stem. The roots do a great job anchoring it, but to keep it standing tall, it's going to be C, and which, as you can see, it's pointing to the stem. So that was our final reporting category, but let's talk about different resources that your students have available to them right now, and actually things that you have available on your computer right now that they can be working on, whether they're in school or they're outside of school. So all students in grades 3 through 4 have what we call, it's the HMH Florida Science grade 5 textbook. And then, of course, 3rd and 4th grade have a 3rd and 4th grade text. It's blue. It looks like this. It has a stingray on it. It is consumable, it is a consumable, so the students usually can rip things out of it. There is also an online platform, and that platform, the teachers can assign the students digital lessons, assessments, work in their book. They can also study from this book while they're at home. It's an online platform at any time. There are leveled readers on here that will read to your student if they are having some issues or maybe need it read to them because it's above a Lexile level. So the HMH Florida Science Book does have a plethora of resources for your student to utilize. The other thing that we've purchased this year are two blended learning platforms, Study Island and Gizmo. Study Island is more of the students are going to read a text about the content, watch maybe some videos, and then answer and practice answering questions about the material. So it's really great practice for those testing questions. And the teachers can assign this. This usually takes them about 15 to 30 minutes, depending upon the length of the lesson to complete. And then they can do up to 30 questions if they like to practice. I would not have your students do 30 questions a night, but 5 here and 5 there cannot hurt them. And then it's just a good refresher, especially if they're moving on to earth and space science. They might need some refreshers on physical science. Gizmos is another online platform that is awesome. It's a actual virtual lab. So the students can answer questions and fill out a sheet and create data charts, tables, practice using their vocabulary. They can be assessed on it, and it's actually them doing a virtual lab. So you don't need all of the messiness at the house, and you don't need all of the tools at your house. Now, that's always really fun, but if it's something they want to practice on, or maybe they even did it at school and they want to go deeper into it, they're able to sign on and get on to Gizmos, and it's a great way. And I'm not going to lie, I know one of the weakest standards in actually content-specific topics is water displacement, volume of water, volume of liquids. And actually the image I have right here is the measuring volume activity. And that is one of my favorite and I think most important ones, because it really gets your students in the habit of practicing water displacement, measuring volume, because that is the lowest statewide as well as district-wide for us. So if they can, utilize that, it's really helpful. Lastly is the Student Interactive Journal. Now, this is a journal that they work on in class. So some teachers might be a little nervous about taking it home because it's so much work that your students did. But I think towards the end, so not right now, but towards the end of the year when your students have finished all of their science core, they've reviewed and learned all of their standards, I think it would be a great way for your students to review their notes that they took and those Align investigations and revisit everything that they worked so hard on through the year and study using their student interactive journals, because it's their own work. And it's a great way to think about this is, we never in college, or even in high school when we went, we had our own books, we could write our own notes, and how else would we study? So the student interactive journals are really, really helpful because it's the students' notes. It's what's going to help them study. It's their own understanding and, connection to that content. So that's really helpful. So these are 4 amazing resources. I know there are more online. If you need other ones that are not district provided, that are just out there, please let us know. We can absolutely send you another list of different things, but these ones we have vetted and we know are very helpful, and we know that your students have seen it. So I think the familiarity of your students using the resources will be helpful to get a little bit of buy-in with them so that they know exactly what they're doing. So let's prep some different things that you can do throughout the year, some different things that you can do when we get closer to that May date for that SSA test, but then also even to prep your students for their progress monitoring tests that they have. We just finished PMA 1 testing last week. The next testing window is November 29th to December 15th, which is PMA 2. And that is going to cover all of the standards that your students learned in Q1 and Q2. So these are some great ways that you can help your students review and be successful in any assessment they take. So first thing is use those science resources we just went over to review those content with your students. The more you're engaged with it, the more the students will be excited and engaged with it. So just be aware of that. Practice using SSA style questions. So pull those questions from either the textbook, you can even find some questions online. You can also use the study island. They have a plethora of questions on there. And then, like I had kind of spoken on, if you find a chart or a graph in the newspaper or in a magazine or on TV, and have your students kind of take their time out and say, what is that chart asking? What is that data chart showing? What can I conclude from it? So really giving them those real life experiences to look at the chart as not, or the data chart, not as something scary, but as something that's in their normal day life is really, really helpful. And then just continue to complete that science home learning homework. I know some teachers try not to give the students too much homework. So please, please, please help your students with that homework so that if they do have misconceptions or they are having issues with it, that you're catching the misconceptions at home, because we know these teachers have a lot of students in their classroom. So if there's a misconception, things fall through the can fall through the cracks very easily. So we need your help as well. Okay, and then if you need more information on specifically the test and the Florida test that we're taking, or through DCPS, you can visit the Florida Department of Education FLDOE link, and also the Duval County Public Schools website with Talk with Team Duval, or you can go into the Accountability Assessment and Accountability Assessment. That team has amazing things available as far as information, a little bit more detailed information for every test and not just science. If there's no other questions, I appreciate everyone coming.